Hi, I'm Maria from Read Fine Books, and this is Picture This Book tag. This is an original tag created by Spreadbook Joy and Shelley Swearingen. I think it's pronounced that way. If not, I'm so sorry. But um, these wonderful ladies have created this tag where the prompts are all inspired by children's books. I'm sorry to say I haven't read any of those books. They aren't really popular in Romania, but I will try to answer the prompts either way because the prompts are fairly clear by themselves. And if these books make you nostalgic about your childhood, please tell me about it in the comments. Is there one in particular you think a 2-year-old would like? So I've been tagged to do this by Tara from Tara Talks Books, and thank you so much for tagging me, Tara. I'm sorry I just got around to doing this, but it's a wonderful tag, and I wouldn't have known about it if it wasn't for you. So thank you so much. With that being said, let's get into the prompts. The first prompt is inspired by the book Love You Forever by Robert Munsch and illustrated by Sheila McGraw. And the prompt is name a book you imagine you love forever. So for me, that is Pride and Prejudice. I can't imagine a world where I wouldn't love that book. It bears no introductions, no description necessary. Everyone knows Pride and Prejudice. I absolutely loved it and I will absolutely love it forever. The second prompt is inspired by Alexander and the Terrible, Horrible, Very Bad Day by Judith Viorst and illustrated by Ray Cruz. And the question is, which books or comforting things do you turn to when you are having a bad day? Well, it usually depends on why that day is bad and what is my energy level, my mental clarity level. Because if I'm having a bad day but my mind is very clear, uh, I will usually dive into some philosophy. I love the podcast Philosophize This. It makes philosophy really relatable, and I am a person who really doesn't understand very much of philosophy and struggles with it. And Philosophize This makes it all very simple and makes it understandable. And for me, to learn philosophy is just the perfect way to unwind when I'm having a bad day, when I want to um, actually when I need to focus on something else, on something that is not stressing me out, on something that requires energy and mental clarity, but that is completely different than the thing that I'm struggling with. And Philosophize This makes it all so great. I love that podcast. I also love Stoic literature. Stoics are a great way for beginners to dive into philosophy because what they teach is actually very practical, and if I understand it, you will definitely understand it too. So, yes, if you want to get distracted and feel good about yourself, I think philosophy is the way. However, if I'm tired and just tired and I want to shut off my brain, I read romance novels. Romance novels are a whole different way of distracting me. They make me feel good. They make me feel giddy and enthusiastic and fun. They are just fun. For example, I listened to one just the other day, Cupcakes and Kisses by Victorine Lisky, and this is an audiobook the author puts on YouTube. It's a 2-hour book, and after it, I just felt happy. It doesn't require energy from me. It doesn't require um, actually anything. I can just listen to it and um, forget about whatever else. It's a perfect way to unwind if you are having a bad day. The next prompt was inspired by The Very Hungry Caterpillar by Eric Carle. So, which books, series, or character sparked your hunger for reading? Mm. So, hunger for reading, this was back when I was a child. Of course, Mary Poppins, it was one of the first novels I read. Actually, here in Romania, there is a publishing house, Rao, that had an entire collection for children when I was a child, and it had titles like Mary Poppins or Peter Pan or 101 Dalmatians or Gulliver's Travels. And these titles are geared towards children 5 to 10 years old. And for me, they were the perfect titles to get me into reading. So I love them all. The next prompt is inspired by Green Eggs and Ham by Dr. Seuss. And it's, what is the most unusual book you've read? The most unusual book I read is Froth on the Daydream by Boris Vian. Um, I read it in French, L'écume des jours. This French book was one of my first novels I was reading in French. I chose it because it was quite short. But what I read there actually made me go and buy the Romanian version of the book because I just couldn't understand anything. I was reading every word. I understood every word, but the sentence just didn't make sense. My surprise was that in Romanian it didn't make sense either. It was just the book. It was absurd. It was it was interesting. After a few pages I really got into it, and it is really wonderful. I advise you to read it, but it is unusual as well. It's very unusual. It's absurd literature. I'm not sure if that is the correct word, but um, in Romanian we have the absurd theater. So um, yeah, I think it's geared toward that kind of literature, and everything is unusual. You think you are in the real world, but houses change shape, animals talk, but you wouldn't expect that going into the book. It appears normal, but it's not, so quite unusual. The next prompt was inspired by Where the Wild Things Are by Maurice Sendak. And the question is, what is your favorite book featuring the natural world? And for this, I don't have an exact answer to the question because I don't read much about the natural world. But I have a great suggestion. It's The Terror by Dan Simmons. And in this book, nature plays a great part. In this book, nature is wild and vicious, and it's historical fiction yet thrilling and very suspenseful, and it has a fantastical element to it. Not sure why, because the book would have been just fine without it, but it really is a great book, and the nature there seems like a character in itself. So, The Terror by Dan Simmons. The next prompt is inspired by Goodnight Moon by Margaret Wise Brown and illustrated by Clement Hurd. And it's, do you read at bedtime? Did anyone ever read to you at bedtime? So, yes and yes. I read now almost exclusively at bedtime because life. There's no time during the day for reading. And yes, while growing up, my mother used to read to me at bedtime as well. And I read to my kid at bedtime. So, yes, full circle here. The next one is a question inspired by Guess How Much I Love You by Sam McBratney and illustrated by Anita Jarem. So, who had the biggest influence on you as a reader? And of course, my mom. She used to read to me at night, and actually, she fell asleep a lot while reading, and that made me want to learn to read so much because that way I could finish stories on my own. Leaving a story at the moment that is most interesting because you fell asleep, that makes your kid really want to read on his own. So, yes, major influence on me. Well, the next prompt is inspired by The Giving Tree by Shel Silverstein. Which book or books would you give to an emerging reader? Which book have you given as a gift more than once? For an emerging reader, I would suggest books that got me into reading, like Mary Poppins, 101 Dalmatians, Nobody's Boy, Gulliver's Travels. Anything like that is just perfect. Now, for the other question, which book I've given more than once as a gift? Um, that would be Atomic Habits, Midnight's Library, and Project Hail Marys. I've given these multiple times, especially when they had just come out, because just because I'm sure that people will find them interesting, because most people do. And I like to offer books that are overall very popular, just because there are a lot more chances that person will read them and like them. And those were all the questions. And now I tag to do this. If you want to, of course, no pressure, but it's a really interesting tag, and I'm sure you love it. Nicole from Dusty Book Sniffers, Flossie from the Great Jelly Library, Tatiana from Reading with Tatiana, and Chatty from Chatty the Mad Chatter. I hope you have fun with this. I'm Maria from Read Fine Books. Thank you for watching.